All right, back at it. Here we are, demo day. I think it's 8. I don't know. I've lost track at this point. I'm picking up right where I left off yesterday, and I'm starting by drilling some pilot holes right here. That way I can router out these holes. And then I need to make some new holes because I have some electrical that I have to run through this framing that I made. So I'm just going to drill some small holes. That way I can run the wires through just like that. And then drill another hole. That way it can go through this piece of framing. I have one light, which is that small hole right there. And then I have another 12-volt fan that I'll end up installing right there. Now I fed this electrical through, and then I was like, I should probably router this out before I feed that electrical through. So I took it out. I came inside and got my router and basically just routed out this hole. It's usually nice one swift movement when I do this, but keep in mind that there is no floor in this bathroom. So I'm like straddling between a good piece of floor and the framing on the inside. So I don't have a lot to work with. And this is always so messy to do this. This is just a router with a flush trim bit is all that is. And you see how like messy and gross it is every single time. Every time. It all gets in my hair. Everywhere. It gets everywhere. Okay, so now that I have that hole, I can feed these wires through that framing and then start with insulation. So this is just standard R13 insulation, and I'm just going to basically fill any holes that I have over there. Could I have cut this piece a little bit less wide? Yes, I could have, but I didn't really care. I'm going to be honest with you. The rest of them I cut to size. Just try to get as close as you can. Cover any of the gaps, any of the small gaps, any of the small pieces you'll want to cover. You'll see there's going to be one spot that I'm not covering, and that is because that is where the shower dome is going to go. And obviously I don't need insulation in that because I'm going to end up routing out that hole. So definitely don't need it there, but you do need it in all these little small nooks and crannies. I ended up putting a little bit more kind of forward of my framing where some of that foam is chipped away. I put some there as well just to be on the safe side. And all I do is I just have my framing square right there and a just a knife, and you just cut it and put it in. That's it. So now the insulation is in, I am ready to put my first piece of wood on top. So I have my saw guide right here. I'm cutting it shorter than 4 feet because that is where I can safely go on half of one of my pieces of framing. So if you watch any of my videos, you know I like to straddle any like trusses or supports or anything like that. So that was just my halfway point because I'm going to end up having 2 panels right here because it's longer than 4 feet. So it's not possible to make this one whole panel. So this was just me test fitting, and then I ended up getting some, it's like special Loctite for styrofoam. I've never used this before, but you have to really be careful with what kind of adhesive you put on styrofoam because a lot of it will actually like disintegrate it and eat it away. But this says it was safe for the type of styrofoam that I have in this roof. So I ended up using 2 full tubes of that. I just laid it on there thick because I wanted it to glue really well. Now you see on the wood pieces, I actually just used regular construction adhesive. So I just wanted a little extra something on that side. So how I fasten these panels is I start on one side and I put a screw in, and then I go to the other side and I put a screw in, and then I pretty much just work my way around. It's easier if you work from the middle out, but since this was the first panel I put in, I started on the outsides just to make sure that glue or that adhesive wouldn't dry by the time I put everything down. But it is easier to start in the middle. That way you don't have the panel kind of warp on you. Now I do have aluminum framing on the sides of this camper. So to fasten the sides, I used 1/4-inch screws, self-tapping screws, and then for my middle piece right there that I actually put over my framing on that one side I'm working on, I just used some 1-inch drywall screws to kind of tack it down. And then not really a whole lot I can do about that middle section that is just glued down. So I left that as is for now, and I'm going to come back to it later. Now this is just me measuring and cutting out that last piece of plywood that's going to go on the roof. I do have a small section that still needs to be covered, so this is just the piece for that. After I cut it, I will bring it up to the roof, and then I have a plumbing vent on the corner of the roof that I have to cut out. So I'm just using a hole saw right here and just kind of eyeballed it to see where it needs to go. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to that. So this is construction adhesive right here that I'm putting all along the sides of this framing. I do suggest using some type of adhesive if you're going to do this. Construction adhesive just works really well in my opinion. So same thing, I just put that down and then put my panel on, and then I can start screwing the panel to the framing of the camper. Now this whole video is going to seem pretty repetitive, and that's because it is. I've pretty much done the same thing over and over and over again all day, so this is just how my day's gone, and it's fine. But same thing, just tack one side in and then go tack the other side in, and you see here I started from the middle, and then I went to the back side of the camper and kind of worked my way out versus working my way in. So it does adhere better and it does lay flatter if you start from the middle and kind of work your way out. So once that's fastened, you see I have a ridiculous amount of construction adhesive that I am pouring on this board right here. And you're thinking to yourself, why would you do that? You just put this new board on there. I don't understand. Well, there is a method to my madness. This roof actually has no structural support. It's basically just foam and wood. And I wanted to add a little something extra to give it a little more stability. So what I'm doing is, that is a 4x8 sheet. I didn't cut it. I'm going to stagger these joints. And by doing that, I'm going to create a stronger bond on the roof. Because keep in mind, even though I made that framing that's there and attached it, I still have a slightly weak point where the old roof is and the new one starts. And so to completely eliminate any possibility of anything going wrong, I thought it would be best if I staggered these joints with new plywood and ran it all the way across the roof. So that is what you're fixing to see me do right now. Now, is this technically the correct way to do this? I have no idea. I've never seen anybody do it. But is this the way that I'm going to do it? Yes, it is. I've sat here and I've thought about this to try to figure out how to strengthen this. And I ultimately decided that given the dimensions of the trim that goes around the edges, a 1/4 inch wasn't really going to do anything negative extra, I guess, to this camper. And so I'm actually really glad I decided to do this because it made the roof a whole lot stronger. So same thing, put a ridiculous amount of construction adhesive on, and then actually you can get on the panel and kind of slide it in place. And then I tacked one side, tacked the other side. Now for the middle, there's really nothing for it to grab onto. So I just used the 1-inch screws and just kind of drilled it in just to kind of make sure it didn't pop up. But you're just pretty much going to see me do the same thing over and over until I get all the way to the other side of the roof. And for your reference, I used about 4 tubes of the heavy duty construction adhesive per 4x8 section. So if you want to do the math, I used a lot of construction adhesive. So if you're planning on doing this, just get a lot. I also thought about doing wood glue and rolling it on, but it was like $40 for a gallon of wood glue, and I didn't think that would cover a whole lot of surface area, so that's really the reason why I went with construction adhesive. Plus, I already know how well it sticks to wood because I've had to remove it from wood, so I felt pretty safe that this was going to be a pretty tight bond. So same thing for the edges here. I used self-drilling screws to drill straight into the aluminum framing. And then for the middle pieces, I just use those 1-inch drywall screws. If you want to use like exterior screws, you can do that too. But as long as it doesn't get wet, it doesn't really matter. And this is going to be a new roof, so I don't plan on it being wet, at least for the next 10 years. So yeah. All right, now that I got all those sections in, I'm at the last section up at the top of the camper. So this is just me trimming that piece that's going to go at the very front cap. I made this a little bit longer than the original one because there's a piece of aluminum that I want to be able to screw it into on the front. So that's just why I made it like 1.5 inches longer. That way it can reach all the way underneath that cap, which is going to be great. So again, ridiculous amount of construction adhesive. And then I put a little bit under the front cap right here. Probably didn't have to do that, but it made me feel better, so I did it. So again, ridiculous amount of construction adhesive, and then get your panel, slide it in there, and then screw it down. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I was actually really surprised on how sturdy this roof is. So this is just what it looks like after I've got all those panels on. It looks nice and clean. So the next step is going to be seam tape, which in my case is duct tape because I have found that it works just as good. The only catch about using duct tape is that you can't go cheap. So this is Gorilla duct tape. Highly suggest using something thick like that because the thin stuff will just heat up and then it'll just peel off. But you see I'm doing all of the seams where the panels meet, all of the sides of the camper, and then tomorrow I'll end up doing the vents and go from there.